The receipt lay on the counter like an accusation, the bold 0 circled in blue ink, screaming louder than the clatter of plates and the hum of the afternoon crowd. Mara Elwood stared at it for a second too long, her chest tightening as if the diner itself had decided to hold its breath with her. A billionaire had just eaten at her table, ordered the most expensive items without blinking, and walked out in broad daylight leaving a tip of nothing. 0. Not even loose change. For a single mother counting hours and coins to survive, that empty space felt heavier than an insult. If you believe in kindness, second chances, and the idea that one small moment can change a life, please like, comment, share, and subscribe to this channel right now. Your support keeps stories like this alive. The diner sat on the edge of a busy downtown street, sunlight pouring through wide windows and turning the chrome edges of tables into mirrors. Lunch rush was slowing, but the air still smelled of coffee, grilled onions, and exhaustion. Mara wiped her hands on her apron and forced herself to keep moving. She had learned long ago that standing still invited tears, and tears meant wasted time. Time was the one thing she never had enough of. At 29, with a 5-year-old son waiting at daycare and rent overdue by 6 days, she lived her life in measured steps and shallow breaths. Every shift mattered. Every tip meant groceries, bus fare, or a little less fear at night. The man had arrived just after noon, crisp suit, polished shoes, the kind of presence that bent the room slightly around him. People like that always did. He wasn't loud or rude, just distant, as if he belonged to another world that only brushed against this one for convenience. Mara treated him the same as everyone else, refilling his water, recommending the daily special, smiling even when her feet ached. She didn't know who he was until the cook whispered it under his breath, eyes wide, awe mixed with disbelief. A billionaire, one of those names that floated through headlines and podcasts, now sitting at booth 7 like it was nothing. She hadn't expected anything extraordinary, but she hadn't expected nothing either. When he paid, nodded once, and left, the receipt told the rest of the story. 0 tip. The universe had a cruel sense of humor, she thought, choosing that moment to remind her exactly where she stood. Her hands shook as she cleared the table, anger and humiliation mixing into a dull ache behind her eyes. She imagined her son, Theo, asking for the sneakers he'd seen in a store window, the ones she kept promising to think about. She imagined the landlord's voicemail waiting on her phone. She imagined the future pressing closer. Under the plate, something caught the light. At first, Mara thought it was just a reflection, maybe a forgotten napkin folded too neatly. She reached for it automatically, her movements tired and practiced. What she felt instead was weight. Not the weight of ceramic or metal, but paper, thick and deliberate. She froze, heart thudding, and slowly lifted the plate. Beneath it lay a folded envelope, plain white, no name written on it, resting exactly where the plate's center had been. Her breath caught. This wasn't normal. Diners forgot phones, keys, sometimes wallets, but envelopes were rare, especially placed so carefully. She glanced around, half expecting the man to be standing there, watching, testing her. The booth was empty, sunlight streaming in, dust motes dancing like nothing extraordinary had happened. With trembling fingers, she picked up the envelope. It felt heavier than it should have. She told herself not to expect anything. Hope was dangerous. Hope had a way of making disappointment hurt worse. Still, she slipped it into her apron pocket, finished wiping the table, and carried on until the end of her shift, her thoughts buzzing louder than the diner ever had. When the afternoon quiet finally settled and her manager waved her off, Mara sat alone at a corner table. The diner was calmer now, the rush replaced by a soft clink of dishes and the low murmur of an old radio. Sunlight slanted across the floor, warm and forgiving. She took out the envelope, smoothing its edges as if it might bite. Inside was a single sheet of paper and a check. Her eyes went to the number first, and for a moment, the world tilted. It wasn't just generous. It was life-altering, enough to cover months of rent, daycare, debts she'd stopped counting, and still leave room to breathe. Her chest tightened, not with relief at first, but with confusion. Why leave 0 on the receipt and this hidden underneath? Her gaze dropped to the paper. The message wasn't long, but it felt heavy with intention. It spoke of assumptions, of how people judged worth by appearances, of how easy it was to overlook quiet strength. It explained that the 0 tip wasn't meant to punish, but to test whether she would react with anger, bitterness, or honesty. The envelope was meant for whoever did their job with dignity even when kindness seemed absent. It thanked her for being human in a world that often forgot how. Mara sat there, tears blurring the words as the weight of the day finally broke through her defenses. She thought of all the times she'd swallowed frustration, smiled through exhaustion, kept going when no one noticed. She thought of how close she'd come to quitting that morning, how she'd almost called in sick because Theo had a fever the night before. She realized that this moment wasn't just about money. It was about being seen, truly seen, in the middle of an ordinary day. Life didn't magically become perfect after that afternoon. The check cleared, yes, and the immediate panic eased. Bills were paid, groceries bought without counting every item, shoes replaced before holes formed. But the deeper change came quietly. Mara walked differently. She held her shoulders a little higher. She stopped apologizing for existing. She enrolled in evening classes she'd been putting off, something practical, something that could lead to a better job. Each step felt possible now, not because of luck, but because someone had recognized her worth when she herself had nearly forgotten it. She never saw the billionaire again. His face faded into memory, replaced by the steady rhythm of her own progress. Sometimes she wondered if he knew what that envelope had truly done, how it had rippled outward into choices and courage. Maybe he did. Maybe that was the point. Kindness didn't need applause to matter. It needed intention. Months later, on another bright afternoon, Mara stood outside the diner on her break, watching people hurry past with lives as complicated as hers once felt. She thought about how easily moments could be misunderstood, how quickly judgment could replace empathy. She thought about how close she'd been to crumpling that receipt and letting bitterness win. Instead, she'd finished her work, done what she always did, and in doing so, changed her own story. If this story is touching your heart, if you've ever felt invisible or underestimated, please take a moment now to like, comment, and share this video. Your engagement helps these stories reach others who might need them today. Mara kept the note folded in her wallet, not for the money, but for the reminder. On days when doubt crept back in, she read it and remembered that even on the hardest afternoons, character still mattered. That dignity was noticed, sometimes in unexpected ways. That kindness could arrive quietly, hidden under the weight of an ordinary plate. Before this story ends, I have one special request for you. Please comment below with one word that describes how this story made you feel. Your words matter more than you know. As the sun dipped lower and the city glowed gold, Mara returned to work, not as someone waiting for rescue, but as someone who had found her footing. The zero on that receipt no longer defined her. What lay beneath it did.